that could be what's happening here.
Yeah, but put it this way: are they going to have enough fuel, enough food to survive? I don't know. What happens if it takes 100 years or 1,000 years of an ice age before it starts melting? Who knows? Or 40,000 years, or if there's a world flood. That kind of reminds me. Reagan had basically a goodbye video. A lot of people don't realize it because it didn't really circulate. Basically, we were having problems with the Soviet Union at that time. It was Cold War going on. So he made it like a videotape. It was a goodbye tape. Basically, if the Russians sent nukes towards our country, right, towards where you're living at, he quickly said, you need to dig a hole such and such deep. Go get your bedroom door or doors from your house, and then put over the hole and put 3 feet of dirt over it. And that would be your protection. And then I started wondering after I've seen the tape myself. And I kind of wondered, well, is that for protection or is that to just bury you?
Yeah. Hard to say. I just wish we would divert our energies towards getting along together and solving the problems with the technology that we clearly have, but it's being suppressed. There's no reason for it. There's really enough resources for everybody. So I think that's what the ETs are working towards, is trying to spiritually enlighten people to the point where we can get along and they can safely have open official contact. I do believe we're going to see disclosure at some point. I think it's probably going to be tightly controlled, or it may burst out. And I feel kind of like Eric. I'm not going to be this year or in the way people think, because the pattern we've seen is this constant sort of carrot dangled in front of us, and we just get these little dribs and drabs and bits and pieces. But it is coming. It's been pretty steady, this sort of release of information.
Well, we need it. But what scares me, it can go, if on disclosure, it can go one of two ways. One is the government comes out and a roundabout way says that, hey, there is UFOs, and this is why we haven't told you through the years, okay? Or it could be plan B, that basically they say that these aliens are hostile towards us, and this is why we haven't told you, and this is why we created the Space Force, or, wanted to create, which I already think we already have had a space for a long time. But it can either go two different ways. And the way the government is, I don't want to sound negative about the government, I would think they would probably go plan B because they wouldn't want to give up their control.
Yeah, it's a real sticky wicket, as my dad would say. It's a tough situation, and I don't know how it's all going to roll out, but gosh, it's not going to roll backwards. It's going to evolve in some way, and I just can't see this being kept secret forever. At some point, it's going to be to everyone's advantage to just bust out the Roswell craft and let everyone see it. Yes, it's going to open a can of worms. I do hope that we don't try to have a galactic war with ETs, because clearly that's not going to end well.
Well, you remember the radio show War of the Worlds, and then the remake, with Tom, whatever his name is, the movie War of the Worlds. That would be scary if we tried to create a war with aliens, because even with whatever technology we have, I don't think we could defend ourselves. Like, what's that? Oh, God, it was on BBS, broadcasting, BBC, I should say, where, they kind of like pushed the button because the Earth was in a way to make a highway.
Oh, yeah.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's too much. We just push this button and you're gone. Poof, like that. So, hey, why don't you tell everybody, why don't you go ahead and list some of your books and where they can find them?
Yeah, that'd be great. Some of the recent ones are Inside UFOs, True Accounts of Contact. That's 10 new cases. Another is The Healing Power of UFOs, Undersea UFO Base, I have a series of books called Not From Here, which is all about the more unusual aspects of UFOs. And my website, actually, if you just Google my name, it should take you there. The address is prestondennett.weebly.com. And, I'd love to hear from people. You can contact me through my website. All my books are there, excerpts. You can also get them on Amazon.com and other online sites or bookstores if you can find one. And, really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this subject. I can't wait until, this is taught in schools. And, we start really taking this in the way it needs to be taken. I mean, really seriously. A lot of the people I've interviewed, they're kids when they have their encounters, and they have no idea what's going on, and they're pretty freaked out. It would be great if we could, start teaching people and really facing, if this is a threat, then let's face it. If it's not, then let's open it up. What's the problem?
No, either way, we need to know. And I don't understand lying about it. All it is like, again, I guess if you put out propaganda long enough, right? And say that something doesn't exist when how many people have seen UFOs? Quite a few people have seen them. It's just, to me, it's like the people go around and say the earth is flat. Well, we know it's not flat. How long can you sit there and try to convince people the world is flat? It's the same way. The government basically is saying there's no such thing as UFOs, but then there's objects, that they haven't been able to catch up with, or a lot of weird things have happened. In the 50s, a couple fighters, went after UFOs and poof, they were gone.
Right. Well, we're reaching the point now where you look ridiculous if you say UFOs are not real. Most people know this is a real subject. They believe it, and Gallup polls show it's over 50%. So I'm pretty hopeful that we're reaching a threshold that's never been reached before.
Oh, yeah. But, back when I took my break out of broadcasting, when I told you I was managing a couple of professional camera stores, we imported in, Czechoslovakian and Russian night binoculars, infrared. And
right.
I took a pair home because back then they were like $2,900 for, surplus one. That's a lot of money. But I remember taking one home, and I got tired of looking at, trying to find wildlife with it. And then all of a sudden, I decided to look at the sky. And then I started seeing things. It would be going one direction, come to a stop, and make a turn and go back another direction. Well, we already know satellites can't do that. So, and comets and asteroids and stuff doesn't do that. So one of our customers at our place of business was a observatory up in Puyallup, Washington. And I got a hold of the director and I said, hey, this is what I'm seeing. He kind of like chuckled. Yeah, sure. You're seeing, because he wasn't familiar that, with the infrared binoculars. I said, okay, look, why don't you take a pair home for the weekend and take a look? He came back the following Monday or Tuesday, returned them, and then ordered a pair. Then they had like 13 or 14 members to that group, all came in and bought them. And they were all saying the same thing. They were seeing objects out there that looked like they were fighting, going different directions, making weird turns. And it was like every night they were seeing this stuff, but they couldn't see it with their huge telescopes.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I know about this. So it's like, I think what we're seeing from, experiencers right now, someone is seeing a UFO at this very moment. If you go by the statistics of NUFORC, National UFO Reporting Center, and MUFON, who receive multiple reports every day, we know that 1 in 10 people at the very most report their encounters. So if you extrapolate that out, any given moment, someone is having an encounter. There's a UFO landing, someone's being struck by a beam of light, someone's being pulled inside a UFO. This is an ongoing phenomenon that never stops.
Oh, I don't.
Statistically, we know this, just from the reports that are coming in. And if they're, they are escalating. If you look at the actual statistic reports, whether this is because now people know about MUFON and NUFORC and know who to call, or whether there's actually a large number of encounters, that is actually increasing. It's hard to say, but I do think that we are seeing an escalation. And what that means, because at some point there's this sort of geometric curve. It's going to reach a point where there's no other choice but open official contact. And I'm not sure we're that far away from it.
Or maybe the government has long time ago. And then again, we don't know what's going on because, again, just like how many countries there are on this earth, how many different alien species or humanoids are there? I will say this, okay, and I kept it quiet, and I brought it up on my show 4 or 5 times in the last year and a half. Back in 1976, I took a job in North Carolina, and I didn't like what the job was. I returned with my wife at that time. I used the word at that time. We got in the desert of New Mexico, and it was nighttime. And we were driving, and I think they didn't have a speed limit or whatever it was. It was pretty high, so I was going fast. And the whole area, and this is at nighttime, around the car lit up. And it was so intense inside the car, it hurt my eyes. So I pull off the side of the road. I think, okay, it's a helicopter, right? Now, I was in Vietnam. I know what helicopters sound like because I've been on a lot of them in my life. I get out of the car, and the light was so intense, it hurt my eyes. And then, poof, it was gone that fast. And it kind of shook me up. And I it shook my wife up, and we talked about it for a couple of hours. And then, hey, it's over with, right? So, years later, I think around early 2000s, I had to go into the doctor for some medical problems. And they do, x-rays and all this stuff. And then I go back for a follow-up. And I'm sitting here waiting to see the doctor, and the head nurse comes out and says, "Hey, Gary, when did you get that metal next to your spine in the upper part of your back?" And I go, "What piece of metal?" And I figured, okay, she's got me mixed up with some other patient, right? So I go in and talk to the surgeon, and, he says, "Well, you got a piece of metal in your back, upper part of your back next to your spine. Do you know how it got there?" And I go, "No, in the military, I fractured my tailbone and they put it all back together, but that's, a long ways away from, upper part of the back."
Sure.
So, the first thing I say, "Well, can you remove it?" And he goes, "No, because there's scar tissue around it. If I remove it, you're going to be in a wheelchair." So I kind of forgot about that. Then one of my sons gets in trouble where I have to go to court every month for a year. And this is in Pierce County, Washington. So every time I go into the building, it sets alarms off. They're metal detectors.
Wow.
Every single time. And it was embarrassing because sometimes they would take me into a special room where you have to get naked. And they do, and they couldn't find anything. Yeah, I didn't think anything really of it till I started, when I, started getting back into broadcasting again and interviewing people who have been abducted. And sometimes I wonder that night that I saw that bright light and I got out of that car, if maybe we were abducted, loss of time or whatever, because I have no way that I ever had any piece of metal in my spine.
Certainly sort of thing I've heard many times. One lady, her story is actually in my book, Inside UFOs. She goes to the doctor. She had been diagnosed with tuberculosis as a young girl, so I had to have regular checkups of her lungs. And goes to the doctor. She's as an adult now, has had a number of UFO experiences, and they find this ring, a metallic ring-looking thing, in her lungs. And he's like, "Oh my God, what's this? Did you choke? Did you have any?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" "No." And this thing had just appeared there. And she's like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And he's like, "We're just going to watch it for now because it's in a place where we can't really get to without, serious surgery." And this thing just sort of calcified a little bit around it, and it's still there. And she feels pretty certain it's got something to do with their UFO encounters as well. So, yeah, this is something I do hear quite a bit.
Well, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people out there probably been abducted, don't realize it, have implants in them, don't realize it. And it's kind of scary, but this